What is the biggest project you ever started? For me, it's this. I'm already 5 months in and still just at the beginning. But, we are still making progress. Those 5 months have been put to good use. I have the helmet, the neck, the arms, and most of the chest plate done. That is a story for another day though. Soon enough, we will have a full Iron Man Mark III suit made from cardboard. Well, cardboard and resin and fiberglass and magnets, you get the picture. Anyways, a good place to start building this costume is with the helmet. So today, we're gonna make one. This helmet is pretty complicated, so I broke it up into 4 different sections. These sections all will be built separately, so let's focus just on section 1. The faceplate is up first, and I will start with the nose piece by tracing it onto a piece of cardboard. If you're wondering, I made these patterns myself with a prototype of this Iron Man helmet. After tracing, I carefully cut this piece out with my X-Acto knife. But there are a lot more pieces to cut out, so let's take care of that. This is the full faceplate. Again, I'll start at the middle. We can't get this piece in the proper position without bending it first, so I curved it horizontally. Once the piece is bent, I glued together all the darts. To fill out the bottom of the faceplate, I have this piece, which has to be bent as well. Another technique I use is an inward angle cut, just to make sure the edge can lay flat. Finally, I can glue those parts on to finish the lower faceplate. The upper faceplate begins with a slightly more complicated panel, but I handled it in the same way, by bending it across the piece and then gluing the gaps closed. That's boring though. How about this? Much better. The temple piece goes right along the edge, but it actually doesn't get bent, so keep that in mind. In between those 2 temple parts is the brow, which gets glued in place. To round everything off, we have the eye lens frame thingy, whatever it is. So there it is, the top and the bottom of the faceplate. I can now glue them together in the middle to unite them as one whole piece. At this point, I just gotta test it out, and it looks not bad, a little goofy though. Anyway, that's the finished faceplate, which means the first segment of the helmet is done. So, it's time to tackle section 2, the jaw. Surprisingly, most of it went together pretty quick, especially the front, which is made up of a lot of simple parts. This piece acts as a support to hold everything in place. Everything looks good, but there still are a few more parts that need to be added, like these bits that extend everything backwards, and this last panel, which makes up the back of the jaw. And that's already it for section 2. Unfortunately, that's about as simple as this project is gonna get, but we gotta try it on again. Honestly, I think this just looks even more ridiculous. Next, we have section 3, the top. This is where this project gets complicated, so I think it's best to start off with something easy like the Widow's Peak. This subassembly goes together pretty quick because it's just a few small parts. Okay, I get it. This piece might look very complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. Kinda. Anyways, the main thing is it has to be curved so all the darts can meet up and be glued closed. Again, that's boring, so let's skip it. This piece definitely helps keep that monstrous top panel in place, since it's pretty flat.
And my hand's permanently stuck.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. I glued that part on both sides, then worked my way down to this back piece, which I glued on flush along its edge. To round off this section, I glued on another piece on either side. Just one more tiny piece goes right here in this little channel. Would you look at that? Section 3 is done. Of course, I gotta do another test fit, and honestly, I'm impressed I was able to get this thing to even slightly line up. Before we start section 4, there is something that needs to be taken care of. If it isn't obvious, these parts are not glued together, so let's fix that. I mainly just took my time lining everything up. Gluing the Widow's Peak was so rewarding. Just look at that. Finally, I can give this thing a real, proper test fit. Check that out. Not too bad. There still is one kinda major underlying problem. It's very flimsy. So we need to add some support. These pieces here glue together simply into a basic skeleton, which then has to get smushed into the helmet. It is a bit of a tight fit, but once it's in there, it locks everything into place. Sections 1, 2, and 3 are all glued together and supported on the inside, so finally, we can get to section 4, the back. I'm just continuing down from where we left off, which brings me to this piece. When bending this one, make sure to keep that bit that goes around the ear nice and flat. With one side done, I can replicate that whole process on the other side. Then glue them together in the middle. This piece gets tucked under the bottom of section 3, and once everything was in the right spot, I glued it on. These parts are very similar to the previous two, so I'll just save you from the hassle. Once it's glued on, this piece rounds off the back of the helmet and mostly finishes up section 4. The only problem is we still have to put together the ears. Luckily, they are fairly simple and are really just a bunch of layers of cardboard stacked together. You might be wondering, why are these circles hollow? Well, that's so there's space for your ears to go, because this helmet is, well, pretty small. So I had to be careful when gluing these components together by making sure to keep lots of space on the inside. This weird semicircle piece creates a nice bevel that goes around the whole ear. And the best part is, I had to build it all over again. One of the last things to do is to cut out all of the screw holes across the entire helmet. Whilst I'm working over there, I need to explain something about this project. So I'm actually kind of worried about this one part, which is the size of the neck hole, because if you look at it, it's not very big. As you can see, the proportions of the whole helmet aren't bad at all, but if you look at the very bottom, that's not a lot of space to work with. But I think I have a workaround if my head can't fit in. And that's kind of it for the construction of this helmet. But before I move on, the chin needs a bit of work. So I went back to the templates and removed all the sections that make up the lip, or whatever it's called. Anyways, I taped those parts on, then traced along the edge. Then I lightly scored into the cardboard with my knife, and used a tool to widen the gap and show that panel line. One final thing to do is add a bit more support behind this section of the faceplate to prevent it from flaring in too much. Time to resin. I've never used this specific stuff before, but it was actually really easy to measure. The main thing is I made sure to use the correct ratio of resin to hardener, and then I applied it evenly across the entire helmet. The nice thing about this resin is it sets in only a few hours and gets super strong. So at this point, we are ready to remove the supports. This gives me the perfect opportunity to strengthen the helmet from the inside using fiberglass. This stuff is the key to keeping this helmet strong, so I cut several squares of it, applying them to the inside of the helmet, making sure to overlap them. Basically, what we're trying to do is create a rigid shell on the entire inside. I think it's safe to say that's not going anywhere. Since the helmet is nice and strong, we can finally begin to remove the faceplate. The resin is very tough, so I had to take it slow. With the faceplate out of the way, I was able to glue in this inlet detail, which kinda hides the gap on the interior of the cheek. Once I was happy with its placement, I resined it as well. Time for that workaround. Because my head doesn't fit, I am going to cut this lower section of the helmet off. Obviously, having the helmet in multiple pieces is not a good thing, so we're going to tape it right back on. This might seem a little silly, but it's so I can glue some magnets inside. I glued these neodymium magnets on with superglue, immediately sprinkling them with baking soda. It makes a superglue set almost immediately, and I heard this tip from Sean's Crafts, so if you're watching, thank you, Sean. There are 8 magnets in the helmet so far, but we're going to need a few more. Within the ears, I need to hollow out space for 3 more magnets, which might be overkill, but honestly, who cares? On the inside of the back panel, I hollowed out space to allow the magnets to sit as close as possible to the outside. A little bit of super glue holds these magnets in place, all 20 of them. Well, now we can throw these parts together. These ears have a bit too much wobble to them, and they don't sit flush on the side of the helmet, so let's just glue them on. Now that the ears are securely attached, the back panel easily magnetizes into place, so problem solved. The helmet is finally done being built, yet it still has a long way to go. I definitely need to figure out how to motorize it, but I'm really happy with where it's at right now, so it's time to focus on other parts of the costume. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of this homemade Iron Man Mark III series, where we build the arms. It's definitely going to take a while, but trust me, the wait will be worth it. Until next time, see ya.